Bringing together diverse voices and roles in agriculture is crucial to educate the public about the truth and importance of our industry. We are honoring those stories and people who are sharing experiences and solutions so that we can work towards a stronger future for our nation. Without agriculture, we cannot survive. Listen to AgTalk, Your Story Matters, on Rural Radio XM 147.
Welcome to AgTalk, where your story matters. It doesn't matter if you have 2 followers or 2 million. Your voice has a place here. Have you been thinking about sharing your story and becoming an Ag Women Connect member? If you're listening to this podcast, you're in luck because you can get 10% off today. Simply go to agwomenconnect.com, sign up to become a member, and use podcast 10 at checkout. We can't wait to meet you and hear your story. Hey friends, this is Venessa Wood, your host of AgTalk, Your Story Matters. And today I can truthfully say that I am sitting down with a very good friend of mine, Donna Hughes from StoneX. You guys, she has just been such a blessing to me as a friend, and she's been a great advocate for Ag Women Connect since we basically first started. She lives in Abilene, Texas, but she is from Chicago, y'all. And I can't wait for her to tell her story of how she got down here to Texas and what she's doing for our agriculture industry. But first of all, today, let's welcome Donna to AgTalk, Your Story Matters.
Thank you so much for having me today, Vanessa. I was really looking forward to being here with y'all.
Well, it's long overdue, as I said earlier. I know that we did a live interview with RFD TV, which you have some connections with as well. And we're also on Rural Radio together, which I think is pretty cool. And we'll talk about your show here in a minute. But first, let's get a background of where you grew up, how you grew up, Donna. And I know this is a big question, but how you got to where you are today.
Well, I'm originally from a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, about 15 miles outside the city. It was a very industrial area, so I grew up with a concrete backyard. The factories were all around us, and basically if we wanted to, pick up a game of baseball or anything like that, we had to use the parking lots of the factories for our playgrounds. It was a very close-knit community, a lovely place to grow up in, but I always longed to be on a farm. I could remember having those thoughts from a child and wanting to be around animals and everything that was rural and with farming. And basically, I probably didn't have a chance of having that happen for a good long time. We were in Chicago my entire childhood into young adult life. And it was after I had graduated high school that I decided I wanted to go on a different path than what could be offered in my little hometown. And so I had been schooled in the arts. I was a dancer, drama, theater, the whole deal. And I had my sights on going to New York and trying to make it on Broadway. It was kind of naive to think that at 17 years old when I graduated high school, but I had my mind made up. But fortunately for me, my dad would not let me move to New York. And I had about 3 months until I turned 18. And I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a temporary full-time job, stash some cash. And when I turned 18, I'm out of here and I'm off to New York. Well, the first job that I was placed at on a temporary basis was at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And that's the commodity exchange where all the contracts of cattle, feeders, corn, all things that are ag were traded there. I did not know that there was such a thing. I had never thought about any type of job in that way, but I ended up working for a gentleman who'd been there for 40 years at that point. He was one of the original board markers who would run back and forth on scaffolds, chalkboarding the prices while people were calling him out from the pits. and you had to be very agile to do that. And anyway, I went to work with him, and he was in the inspections and deliveries department. And he worked with USDA in telling them where to go for physical grading of cattle, hogs, butter, eggs, anything that was deliverable on the exchange. And so it was he and I for about a year and a half. I learned a lot under his wing, and I decided I wanted to do a little bit more. And I had my choice of going to a lot of different firms to increase my knowledge and to delve further into the business. And I was fortunate to be hired by a gentleman by the name of George Siegel. And he was a pork belly trader and hedger at the exchange, and pretty much the top guy as far as the sole individual in that field. And I worked for him for 35 years and learned everything that I could about anything I didn't know about farming, processing of food products. We basically bought the bellies of hogs, stored them in cold storage warehouses, and seasonally we sold them back to the packers who we bought them from so that they can make them into bacon. And so the 12 weeks of summer is what we called the BLT season. And so for 9 months, we accumulated pork bellies in warehouses across the country. And then those 12 weeks of summer is when we sold them back and they were processed into bacon. So that was a really, really cool gig to have. Being a young person in the business, I was fortunate to be with the grandfathers of the business who had been there for decades. And so basically that was my college. I never went to college, but learned so much about the business and about business in general and life. And it was a great gig to have. And about 35 years into it, I felt a calling from the Lord to move to Texas, which was very specific and very out of the blue. And I didn't know what that would look like with family, church, job. I thought there was no way that could ever happen. And everything turned around in 6 weeks. The house was sold. We moved down here. It just was a whirlwind. And that's when I got to Texas. It was basically a family deal that brought us down here. The Lord confirming that's what we're supposed to do. And since we've been down here, I've been blessed abundantly with relationship and family and all the things that makes life awesome and great.
Yeah, the pork belly thing, that was, gosh, I don't know if you've ever told me that story. Maybe you had. So would you like travel like all across the United States whenever you got that pork belly, or was it just there in Chicago or?
Actually, we worked with Swift and John Morrell and Smithfield Packing, all the big producers, and they didn't have risk management departments. So they told on my boss, they did their hedging through us and learned the business from my boss. And we had to come up with a computer program for their accounting division so that there was accountability for it and everything. I mean, I was like in my early 20s and doing this. And it's like, you know, my first experience with a computer was when they told me I had to stop writing out my inventories by hand and put them on the computer. And I remember telling the gentleman, I was like, okay, I'll do it, but I don't think this is going to be around very long. You know, talk about young and dumb, right? Now our whole world is, you know, controlled with computers and everything, but we would buy them from the individual facilities in the country and put them in the warehouses in Des Moines, South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota. And I told my boss, I need to go see these places. I can't just sit behind a desk because I don't even know what it looks like. And so I went to the hog kill plants and I went to the cattle kill plants and saw it from start to finish, you know, with the product rolling out the door and everything. I loved it. I've been a hands-on person, you know, for a long time. So.
Okay, so what does it look like to store pork belly? I got to know this.
Basically, it's the belly of the pigs, and they palletize them. There's 50 pieces that they stack on pallets, and then you have to bag it with specific, kind of like, they do with cotton, where they bale them. Well, you have to make sure it's all completely enclosed. And then they take that stack of pallets and they put it in the warehouse in the cold storage, the deep freeze. And then it stays there until you sell it to somebody, and then they'll load it into a semi truck and they'll bring it to a processing facility and they'll make it into bacon.
Okay. Yeah. I love it. See, these are interesting things.
And these are things that I never in my life would have even thought that I needed to know or would know, or, honestly, when I started my job at the Merc, I was like, I'm going to get enough cash to get out of here in a couple months. And I'm in New York. Well, God knew that I didn't need to be like suffering on the streets of New York, figuring out how I was going to eat and everything, and made it a really great experience for me from the start. So I had no regrets,
Yeah, that's right. We think that our journey and our paths are going to go one direction, and when we are young, we are naive, and it's going to be, that straight line. And then you look at your life and there's so many ups and downs and twists and curves, but God always has the plan. There's so many nuggets in that history, Donna. Okay, so I have to take it back just a little bit. So I want to know what the Chicago Exchange was all about. I mean, were you intimidated to be in front of all of those men and working with them?
I think in a way I was, because I was the absolute youngest out of, what I would call my peer group. The gentlemen I worked with and for, they were middle-aged. They'd been in the business for decades. But I did take it as a tremendous learning opportunity. So I did a lot of watching and listening. And through those relationships, I was introduced to people that looking back on it at that age, you never would think the effect that would have on you as an individual, your work ethic, and your career. One of the gentlemen that I was exposed to early in my career was actually the president of the CME at that time, and that was Clayton Yiter. And he went on to be Secretary of Agriculture under President Reagan, and he was the author of the NAFTA bill. So, fast forward many years and looking back on that, I was 17 years old and, having coffee with the gentleman that, would affect the world in that way. It just awesome.
That's incredible. Yeah. Oh, I would have loved to even one day in that setting, I'm sure it was exciting, and every day I'm sure was a different day. You never knew it was probably going to get thrown at you, but that's awesome to be mentored by the OGs. And then I love the fact too that you mentioned, Donna, that you didn't go to college. And I feel like there's a bit of a shift right now about maybe college, isn't for everybody. And I fully support the kiddos that obviously do go to college, but also the ones that don't and that go and learn. It's funny, a trade skill. You literally learn the trade skill. But there's so many ways to continue your education, I guess is what I'm trying to say, without actually having to go to a college, university, and the people that you surrounded yourself with. I mean, you're a very successful businesswoman now, and I'm glad you didn't leave that part out. And I love the fact that you listened to God, right? And you got down here to Texas on that little whisper. So tell us more about your Texas experience and who you're working for now.
So when I came down to Texas, I still was continuing to work for my broker in Chicago. He graciously let me continue before there was any kind of telecommuting or, what we know is pretty much normal now. 22 years ago, that's what I was doing out of my home while raising my kids. and it worked out well and everything. And I thought, I need to get connected to the agriculture in the area. I've been doing this for so long, and basically it's been from behind a desk. And I need to have somebody pour into me, the experiences and the life in general. It's like the things that I wished for, now I was here, and feeling that God was just, continuing to open the doors and windows. I did get an opportunity to connect with some folks in media down here pretty much right away. And they had encouraged me to attend any of the conferences that I could that would be produced by AgriLife Extension. And, they said that's where your producers are going to be. That's where you'll gain knowledge from its teaching. And, you don't know about the production side. And so that's what you're lacking. And that would be the best place aside from moving to a farm and living there and working. And so I remember my very first wheat conference was in Taylor County here in Abilene. And, those conferences run all day. And so, I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning and very enthusiastic. And after I walked out of that conference in the afternoon, I had so many mixed emotions. I was so grateful for the hospitality and the friendliness and the warm welcome that I got. But I was also like, oh my gosh, is this something bigger than I can chew on? I can't even imagine like the knowledge and skill that the producers have and have acquired over the course of their careers to be able to be successful. And so I thought what I've learned on my end of the business, I've seen success, a huge amount of success in Chicago. And so I was really feeling like that was something that I needed to bring to the farming community, farming and ranching community. Back then there weren't a lot of us brokers around. And so, I thought if I can be a help to somebody in helping to manage the risk, then I'd love to do that. And so that's what got me going on it. Extension is an educational aspect of what they do. I wanted to be an educational aspect of what they did as well. And so working with AgriLife has been a great complement and a great partnership to what I do. And I am very, very grateful for all the connections and things that I've been blessed to be a part of with AgriLife Extension.
Yes. Well, you are a busy bee. I mean, you're on the road quite a bit, Donna. Right now, you are at a Western Heritage facility in Abilene, Texas, right? You're live there, which I think is really cool. And I've watched, just on the sidelines, because you've been a part of Ag Women Connect, and we bump into each other at other events. And I mean, people they love you. They love what you do, and you're so easy to talk to. And so I'm just going to say, Donna does her job very well. And I'll say this too, just as coming from a farming background, Donna, I don't think my dad ever really got into trading or hedging or any of that. And so in this next segment, I kind of want you to break that open just a little bit, because I'm sure we've got some listeners on here that may want to go that route, but they don't know what's the first step of doing this and then getting the right help. And so I want to hear all about that. But before we get into that, we're going to take one quick break. Hang on. We'll be right back after this commercial. Okay, friends, we are back from the break. Okay, Donna, I think the perfect question to start off with is, what is risk management? So you've said that a couple of times, and how does StoneX help the producers?
So for the producers, there's actually two sides to hedging. We've got the producer side, and then we have the end user side. So from the producer side, when you begin production, planting cotton, planting your different row crops. If you're buying cattle, you've got mamas that are pregnant, whatever the situation is, you've got price risk until you deliver, sell, whatever it is you're going to do. And so what we do is we help to mitigate your exposure to that price risk. So if you're planting your crops and you're not going to sell them, 6-9 months down the road, and you're afraid that the price will fall until then we help you to figure out what type of position you need to take in the market so that if the price does drop, that you may be losing value on your physical product, but you're preserving dollars in a hedge account, which is going to accumulate value as the market goes down.
Okay. Yes, that was okay. That was simple enough for me to understand. Okay, Donna, so what would be like a good guesstimate now so hedging's been around for how many years?
Hedging's been around for a long time. The exchanges are more than 100 years old.
Okay.
And the CME in particular, back in the day when it was founded, it was actually the butter and egg exchange. And so basically producers would come to the market, as we call it, and they offset their price risk with people we call speculators. So if there is somebody out there who wants to quote unquote go to Vegas, they can be the opposite side of a trade for somebody who's a producer. The producer can be one side of the trade, the speculators the other side of the trade. And so that's how the exchange was founded all those years ago, is a way for producers to offset their risk.
And how many do you think now are using this? I'm sure you've seen a massive increase, but I feel like more and more producers are hedging. Is that a correct statement?
I would say yes. And being in the business the number of years that I have, starting out, we had a lot of producers that maybe, as they would say, well, I've been doing the same thing all these years and I'm just fine. And so they were reluctant to get involved because they didn't understand it. And, learning is half the battle. That's why I decided that my mission in all of this would be from the education side, because the more education you get about it, the more comfortable you become and the more you're apt to use it. As we've seen generations come back to farming, I see an uptick in the involvement of the children or the grandchildren of the folks that I originally was dealing with when I first came to Texas. So I think between that and, the programs that Extension has, and the universities in general are doing a fantastic job of covering markets and hedging and agriculture production. You've got, places like Texas Tech that are doing their Cotton University. I mean, just all kinds of things that are going on, that has contributed to more and more people coming back to the markets. With that, we've seen an influx also on the opposite side of fund activity. These are, like Goldman Sachs Commodity Index. These are like Wall Street funds that are the speculating side of it. We've got those types of firms as well as just like regular individuals. And so as time has gone on, there's been billions of dollars that have been poured into commodity markets on the speculator side from these funds. So with that, it makes it for a lot of liquidity, a lot of like what I like to call players in the sandbox. Mm-hmm. But it also makes for very, very volatile markets at times. And so the risk could be amped up on any particular day. We've got a few stories circulating right now, that are making some of these markets a little bit more volatile than they would usually be. And so with that, folks need to be definitely working with somebody who's akin to these markets and the industry in general. It could be a curse or a blessing, depending on how you look at it and what you have going on.
Yeah, I'm going to say the no word, the new screwworm, right? So that's a big deal. Oh my goodness, there's been so much information come out on this. Donna's laughing too, because I'm sure that your feed and your phone has blown up. But I mean, can we talk about that? Can we talk about how these things do actually affect the market and they affect the commodity prices? Yeah, it's kind of a mess right now.
It is. And if you think back, years ago, we had stories in the cattle markets and the hog market at one time, E. coli. We had the E. coli story. I think it was Time Magazine or Newsweek Magazine more than a few decades ago. They had a plate on their cover and it had 2 eggs for the eyes and it had 3 pieces of bacon making a frown. And the whole story was, about how bacon is processed, not good for you, causes all these things. That was one of the stories that I've weathered markets through. We've had countries that have basically cut off our exports at different times. They've raised tariffs on our exports at different times. It seems like there's always something coming out of left field that affects our price. That's what I like to tell producers. We know what we know today, but it's what we don't know that's going to come tomorrow or the next day. This is why we hedge.
Yeah.
That's exactly why we hedge. Nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what's coming next. And you want to be safe rather than sorry. And it may be dollars spent, but it's good dollars spent because you could be in for risking a whole lot more.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked that question because it makes complete sense. And I'm sure the whole Harvard study on red meat did not help y'all either, which that study's bogus, by the way. Eat more beef.
And you've got so many people turning to proteins. And so we've seen big demand on our beef side. How that's going to be reflected, with economic conditions being as they are, as we go forward. I mean, they're talking about interest rate hikes now, but before the end of the year, we weren't talking about that just a couple of months ago. Unemployment, jobless claims, consumer sentiment indexes. There's a whole lot of economic factors that go back to things that affect our markets. And with beef demand, all of those things certainly do affect it. We've got the lowest cattle numbers in decades. And, we've seen our kills back off. Now we have seen higher weight animals. So production, that's a different story in regard to less slaughter. But when you throw in a story about screwworm and everybody's trying to figure it out and go from here, it's the uncertainties. And when you have a lot of money from the fund activity invested in markets and you get a story like screwworm or something else that causes uncertainty or drama in the markets, they do not like to be a part of that. And so, with that, we get tremendous market swings. And so that's some of what we've been seeing as of late. They have to be accountable to their investors. That's where all that comes from.
Again, makes your job an interesting one every single day.
It is. And, it's something I really, really enjoy doing. I've had people tell me that I'm passionate about what I do. I care about the people that I am able to be blessed to service. You're involved in their lives. I mean, some of these operations are generational. You're led to, not only help them to preserve and gain market share and all of that, but you're helping them to preserve legacies. With economic conditions and everything, we've heard of so many bankruptcies and things like that. And honestly, I've always said that if what I'm doing is not an asset to somebody and it starts working in the opposite direction, I don't know that I would want to do it anymore, because you have to believe in what you're doing and you have to believe that you're helping people in doing it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I ran across kind of a scary statistic the other day, and I think it's worth mentioning is 300 farms have filed bankruptcy, and this is according to the 2024 USDA analysis, and that's a 46% jump from the year before. And so I'm interested to see, what the numbers are for 2025 and 2026. But I think the question that I'm coming to, Donna, is Commodity prices are some commodity prices are the same as they were, back in the 70s and 80s. And I feel like that we're just living in a day and time where we do have to work smarter, right? We have to find other ways of how to keep our land and how to keep farming. And I think what y'all provide is part of that solution. Don't you agree?
I do. And that's the thing that's to me is troubling. Like you say, I mean, we're getting commodity prices that are from decades back, but yet our inputs are so much higher than they have been ever. And now we've got a situation like, the US-Iran war. And, that's affecting our fertilizer prices tremendously. It's affecting our diesel prices, crude oil. I mean, there's things that producers just have no control over. And sure, you could have bought up a bunch of crude oil or fertilizer, a couple of months ago before all this happened, but we don't know how long this is going to last. I mean, we're talking about, Russia and Ukraine, that was supposed to be a relatively short deal. And now we're going on 4 years there. And so who knows, how long this is going to be around. But the other thing that I think is worth mentioning in regard to all of that is the mental health conditions of our farmers and farm families. If things aren't going well, it's affecting the farmer, the producer, but it's also affecting the entire family in different ways. And I will mention that AgriLife Extension, they've got a tremendous program for farmers in that way, producers, anybody involved in agriculture. If you're feeling it, they've got a support number, not just for Texas, but people from outside of Texas can also call the number. And they've got people on board that you can talk to. And, if you just need to talk or vent or whatever, but it's a very real crisis. I am probably 1 or 2 relationships away from people that have lost people over the last couple of years. And it's devastating to even hear about it. Yeah. And we need to do something. It's not something that we need to be complacent about. We need to be supporting people and we need to be there for our producers.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. So I'm glad you brought that up. That new program is that Farm Hope?
Yes.
Donna? Okay, right. Yep, that's good. Well, and a great thing about what they've provided is, if you decide to call in or chat or text or email or, choose your communication, but you're actually talking to somebody who understands and who has been where you have been. It's not somebody from New York or LA or, some of the bigger cities or whatnot that have been removed from agriculture. These are folks who understand the industry and the struggles of a farmer and rancher. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and we will definitely get that in the show notes. And just a little bit more information on that, you guys. I mean, Donna was absolutely correct. Our farmers and ranchers, they come right up next to our veterans as far as mental health issues. And so when you spread that across 2% of our population, which makes up our farmers and ranchers, I believe it's 30% or over 30% deal with, mental illness at one time or another. That is a crisis. We're in the middle of a crisis right now. So, if you eat today, if you see somebody driving out on that country road and you're behind them, be nice. Be nice. Look out for your farmers and ranchers, shake their hand, look them in the eye, tell them you appreciate them. It's the little things like that truly go a long ways.
Absolutely.
Okay, friends, we're going to take one more break. This conversation's going by so fast, but we still have more to talk about. So hang on, we'll be right back after this commercial break. So we are back from the break, and we're just going to continue this conversation because you do have another side of you, and I want to know kind of how that's transferred. Like, so your dance, your artistic background, obviously, like, you're still passionate about that because you have a studio in Abilene, or your daughter does. Is that correct? I don't want to misspeak.
Yep, no, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
It was probably about 8, 9 years ago. One of the local churches that we go to, we've had a relationship with, at that point, it was, more than a decade. My daughter had gone to New York and she studied with Joffrey Ballet. And she came back to Texas, and the church had asked us if we could put together some dance classes for staff children because the local studios were all full on their classes. And so we thought, yeah, that'd be something fun to do. And so we wanted to combine a very uplifting community type dance program. And it was going to be a short-lived thing just for a semester. And so we took the basics of dance, ballet, tap, all of that, and merged that with our faith side and came up with these ballet classes. And we had about 10 kids, very, very tiny girls. And we had one class and we got through the first semester and we thought, you know what, we have to have a little recital for them. And so we did a little recital with bundt cakes and some, refreshments, and had about 40 parents show up. And we thought, okay, that was great. And now she'll probably go back to New York and do the professional thing like she had her plans on doing and everything. And the families said to us, can we do this again? And so we said, okay, that's good with us. And so now fast forward 8, 9 years later, we have about 25 classes and we've got about 250 students. And we've got about 6 teachers on board with us. And it's a thing. And
Yeah,
but
that's impressive. Wow, I didn't know it was that big, Donna.
yes. And, and the thing is there's been no advertising. There's been no soliciting for students, anything like that. We just mentor our students. We support them. We encourage them. It's all based in faith. And so, it's not competition. It's not something that leaves a person feeling bad when, they're done with their lessons. And I can't tell you the testimonies that we've heard from students and parents and even people we don't know that come to recitals. They touch your heart, number one, but you know that God's over it and, and God's doing things throughout the entire process. And I'm so thrilled that he chose my daughter to do this. And I'm so blessed that I get to see all these things happen. And it's not something I did as a parent. That's the awesome thing about it, because a lot of times you're like, well, let me see if I can get him a job here. Let me see if I could do this. Let me steer him in this direction. It's like, God took her to New York. God brought her back to Texas, and God had her stay here to serve in that capacity. And it's just been awesome.
I love that you talk about your faith so much too, and your journey and your daughter's journey. It's refreshing to hear that. What's the business called, if you don't mind me asking?
It's called Dance as Worship.
Okay.
And we operate out of Beltway Park Church. They've got 2 facilities in town, a North and South campus. And so Mondays we're at the North campus and Tuesdays and Thursdays we're at the South campus.
That is wonderful. Okay. And so what are all the classes? I'm sure you do ballet. Do you do hip hop? I mean, does it just kind of vary?
Hip hop is a big one. We've got kids as young as 5 years old that are doing hip hop. I'd say, the oldest students that we have, probably late teens. We have had adult classes at times when we've got a call for it, but we do ballet, we do tap, we do hip hop. The one I love is liturgical. And so
What is that?
So that's kind of like faith inspired and more as Holy Spirit led. And so it's interpretation of godly lyrics. It's awesome. It's just phenomenal. I mean, when I walk away from any one of these recitals or even some of the classes, when I'm in rehearsals with these girls, it's like, you get those God chills that start at your toes and it goes all the way up through your body. You can feel it coming out of your head. I mean, it's amazing, just amazing.
Because the Holy Spirit is moving through you, through them.
Yes.
All of you, the energy.
And we have learned so much from the students. It, as anything is with God, it's just been awesome.
Okay, so I have to tell you two stories, and it's about dance, so you'll appreciate this. So I took my daughter to orientation this last weekend, which is in Plainview. And so growing up, we used to go there to that university to listen to the symphony. My mom loved that, right? And so this is the auditorium. This is where everybody goes to either go to the symphony or plays or whatnot in that town. And so we're sitting there in the auditorium, and I looked over at her and I said, so when I was about, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years old, I was part of the Nutcracker. And they had the Nutcracker there in Plainview for several years. And I was a little mouse. And I will never forget being a little mouse in the Nutcracker. It was like the best of all times, Donna. I mean, I remember the stage. I remember the dressing room. I mean, everything about it. This was over 30 years ago. And then for Mother's Day, we were kind of having just like a roundtable discussion of asking everybody, like, what is your favorite memory of your mom, or one of your favorite memories of your mom? And my daughter, Andy, said, well, when I was in dance, I just remember, getting all dressed up and doing the makeup and the bows and going out. And I just felt so cute and so important. But one of her favorite memories was dance. And so I just wanted to say that because it's so true, because it means a lot to these little girls. And then they grow up.
Venessa, my earliest recollection of dance was when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And, they had these little dance cases where you could put your tap shoes in one side and your ballet shoes in the other. And I remember the smell of the steel on the tap shoes. I remember that to this day. And it, like you say, I mean, it gets embedded in yourself. And memories there, it's just awesome. It becomes a part of you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you even brought up the smell. I think it was last week or the week before. I rode my horse for like 4 times in a row, and I don't think that's happened in probably, I can't even remember, years, probably decades ago. It's been a long time. But the smell, just like the smell of the dirt, I was just like, man, like I really, really miss this. Like, this just feels like home, riding a horse is awesome, but it's all the senses coming together.
Yes.
And I hope everybody knows the importance of smelling dirt.
Yes.
Or freshly plowed ground. Because my husband had just got done plowing that day, and I was like, God, this just smells so good.
It goes down to your soul.
Yes, it does. Okay, so before we end this conversation, I know that you have kind of put your heart and soul into an event that you created a couple of years ago, last year, actually. Last year was your first gala. And I know you have it coming up and you're starting to kind of push that information out. So would you mind sharing what that's all about?
Sure, absolutely. It's held at the Amarillo Farm Show. This year, it's going to be on Wednesday, December 2nd, and it's a Cattlemen's Beef Roundtable event. And what we did last year is we brought together industry experts that comprised our panels of discussions for genetics, markets, and screwworm and borders. And so we had support from Texas cattle feeders, Cavana's beef packers, Texas A&M, West Texas A&M University supported us, AgriLife Extension. We had a lot of support going into this thing. It was our first event. Dr. Temple Grandin was our keynote speaker, which she's always phenomenal. And the proceeds from the event are always to be contributed to a nonprofit. Last year, it was the Panhandle 4-H Alumni Association. And this year, it's going to be the Working Ranch Cowboy Association. And so what we do is we have the panels to begin the program. And then after that, we have a social hour, we have the dinner, and then the keynote speaker. This year's keynote speaker, we are so thrilled to have Justin Benavidez, who's actually from Tulia. I met him when he was connected with AgriLife Extension in Amarillo as an economist there. Well, short order, he got called to Washington, D.C., and he now serves as the chief economist at the USDA. And so we're going to have him as the keynote speaker. We have Bart Fisher from Texas A&M coming this year. We're going to be speaking on policy, genetics, and markets. So we intend on having somebody from NCBA, Texas Cattle Feeders. Our genetics panel is awesome. It's a wonderful event. And if you want more information on it, you can go to the Amarillo Farm Show website. They have a page specifically for it, and there's QR codes there. You could sponsor a table. You can be an event sponsor, or you could buy a single ticket. And last year we had 300 people show up for our first event, which we were just blown away by. We have a feeling we're going to be sold out this year. And so I would encourage folks that if you're wanting to attend, to get your tickets early.
Yes, I'm going this year. So I'm excited. It's December 2nd, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. See, I've had that date kind of burned in my head because I've been looking at it. So yeah, we'll bring our Ag Women Connects ladies and hopefully have a bigger table this year. So I think it's awesome that what you're doing, and I love that you kind of switch up of who you donate to every year. So I didn't know that part of it, and I actually really like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of need. We want to be involved, and we do this for producers, we do it for the industry, but we want to do it for the youth programs that are out there to support the people that are coming up in ag. And with stock shows and all that kind of thing, and medical funds for the cowboys and all of that, there's a lot of need, and we want to help be a part of that.
I love it. Well, we'll be looking forward to it, my friend. And before we hop off here, Donna, how can people get a hold of you, in touch of you, or in touch with you?
You can give me a call on my cell phone is 214-613-1688. My email is donna.hughes, Hughes, and the number 1 at stonex.com. You could find me on Twitter or LinkedIn.
I love it. Well, thanks again for making time out of your busy day to be on AgTalk. Your story matters. We're going to have to do this again soon. We'll do it after the gala so we can do a wrap up and talk about that.
Yes, look forward to it.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of AgTalk. Your story matters. Make sure to tune in every Tuesday for new episodes and learn more about us and our mission at agwomenconnect.com. You can find us on all major social media platforms, and we can't wait to share your ag story.